and welcome to our world, the whole ecology. I'm here with Standing Bear, John Gonzalez, and welcome to the studio here, John. Thanks for coming down.
Yeah, thank you, Robert, so much for having me. As always, it's an honor to share this space with you.
Talk about your live streaming and how you got into it.
My name is John Gonzalez. I'm from Rhode Island, Wakefield, Rhode Island, and I've lived here for 30 years. And I'm also known as Kanipa Masqua, Standing Bear. That is a ceremonial name. Mm-hmm. It is an honor to have that name because it is the name that was given to me during the final days of the Standing Rock occupation. And you know, as far as live feeding in and of itself goes, I kind of grew into it. It happened by accident. It happened very organically because of the importance and the necessity of documenting some of the events that occurred at Standing Rock. So we had many live feeders at the camp. It was very difficult to get internet. So sometimes I just simply had to record and then do my uploads at the Prairie Nights Casino where I had a Wi-Fi connection.
Wow.
Yeah.
Must have been interesting having a Wi-Fi connection in the middle of North Dakota.
Well, it was a good thing we did because with the network provider I had, the signal was very poor. Not to mention there was interference with respect to infiltrators that were cutting lines. When our techs would try to set up the Wi-Fi, we had infiltrators that would come in, they'd cut them, we'd fix them, they'd cut them, we'd fix them. Also, Tiger Swan, and had the military technology to sort of DAP, we called it. They would DAPL us. Our lines would go dead, or the signal would be scrambled, or even intercepted. I mean, they were always monitoring us on a regular basis.
And that was Blackwater of the infamous shooting in Iraq.
Yeah.
That they were caught with, so they changed the name. And isn't that Eric Prince's company that Betsy DeVos, that's her brother, Eric Prince, that owns Tiger Swan? Yeah, it is.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
What's amazing about the whole Tiger Swan issue is that this was a private paramilitary organization which began in Iraq doing military contracts, and now here they are working for private corporations, collaborating with public servants, mm-hmm. which would be Morton County Police, the Army National Guard, and the BIA. So they were collaborating with a private security company.
Mm. Like the infamous Pinkertons when, yeah.
That's right.
What is DAPL and what was the company and what were they doing?
DAPL is the Dakota Access Pipeline, and that's what we are opposing. That's what our indigenous communities are opposing. Mm-hmm. This is, in fact, an indigenous-led prayer. I call it a prayer, as opposed to a movement. I think movements have been stopped. Movements can be infiltrated, but not a prayer. And this is a prayer that's spreading like pollen all across this country and the world. Yeah,
and you have there was a lot of prayerful action that was part of the whole way that this came about. In fact, the people were called water protectors rather than protesters. Can you tell us about that different kind of an approach?
Well, it's a prayer movement, and led by our indigenous communities, and it is our indigenous communities. I think there's a quote even here by James Spioni. I'll read it, which is a beautiful thing. It says, "If we're to survive this century, it's the indigenous people who will lead the way forward." And wherever there is land, anywhere, there are people that grew from that land.
That's-
Find them. That's my message, is to find them. Make that connection, because we are all indigenous. We are all from the womb of Mother Earth. And when we realize that, we realize that this is a movement about bringing the I-thou relationship back to all of life, the way our indigenous communities had it for all the world.
Yeah. I picked up this poster here, and this is what's coming up here. It says here you're going to be on a panel for a screening of a movie, Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock.
Yeah.
And tell us about this movie. As a matter of fact, Myron Dewey, one of the producers, was someone who you got to be close with.
Oh yeah. Well, this is a terrific documentary. It's the first documentary that came out of Standing Rock, and certainly not the last. And there are others that are coming out as well. But directors here are Josh Fox, Myron Dewey, and James Spioni. And Myron did much of the drone footage down at the camps, the resistance camps. The first drone pilot was Dean Dedman, my beautiful brother Shizay Bidzel, and he just came out with a book, and you can check that out. But so Myron and I, we became acquainted at Standing Rock. I met him several times, and I think we did our first live feed at Prairie Nights Casino. It was under Dan Nanapkin's feed, you know, who's actually pictured in some of the documentary movies you'll see. And yeah, so Myron and I, we did our first showing of Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock on Martha's Vineyard with my beloved Aquino Wampanoag family. And it was a beautiful thing. You know, Myron did some drone footage, and you can check out the drone footage on Digital Smoke Signals,
Right,
which is Myron's network. Yeah.
I've been following Myron since they did the Respect and Protect, when the young people walked across the country.
Well, the way it started, Robert, is that our youth ran to Washington.
Yeah.
And you know, this movement is led by our youth. You know, and since the time our youth ran to Washington, they've lit a sacred fire, whose embers are spreading all across this country and the world. You know, the camps may be closed, but Standing Rock is everywhere.
It was an occupation, but in a way it's kind of a funny thing,
Yeah.
because there was a treaty called the Fort Laramie Treaty that's actually a pretty significant document. And so they're occupying land that was their treated land. How does that happen?
Treaties, you know, are the supreme law of the land. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851 is the treaty that made it past the chronological list of international treaties, and you know, it is the law of the land, and this is why we say honor the treaties. Our indigenous people, Lakota, Nakota, Dakota, Cheyenne people, are entitled to their land, the mineral rights. You know, really they are a wealthy people with respect to Mother Earth, but they are being robbed every day of their natural resources, the gold and the Black Hills and the uranium, and the
tar sands and the Bakken fields.
Well,
and,
yeah, the tar sands up in Canada, and you know, yeah, Canada has the third largest oil reserves next to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela.
Yeah, and it's just horrible, sludgy stuff.
Oh, it's nasty. It's full of you know, sand and ice, and you know, if you go there, the devastation is greater than England, the size of England. It looks, you know, you could Google it, look online. That's the beauty of technology today. You don't have to be there. You could actually see the egregious devastation which is occurring to Mother Earth. We're the end users Oftentimes we find ourselves as the end users, but we have to go back and see where these fossil fuel infrastructures begin, and just what kind of damage it's inflicting not only on Mother Earth, but all the surrounding communities. And more often than not, it is our people of color that are most heavily impacted by these devastating fossil fuel infrastructure projects.
As we see in Fields Point, right here in Rhode Island.
Right, Fields Point. That's where they want to put up the National Grid's liquefaction facility. Again, it's another dirty fracked gas fossil fuel infrastructure project, which is designed to tether us for the next 40 years. At a time when we need to be moving towards, renewables, obviously, and those who will be most heavily impacted are Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans. Mm-hmm. So already they have the greatest incidences of asthma and respiratory illnesses, lymphomas, various types of cancers, because all these chemicals that they use, over 200, are carcinogens, and their lifespans, there's premature death, the infant mortality rate is off the charts as well. So we need to learn a lesson from what happened with that coal-fired power plant, Brighton Point.
Yeah, Brighton Point.
Brighton Point, because you can go online and find out what the incidences of health statistics were for that facility, which is now being dismantled. Right. Now, I don't know exactly what the exit strategy is for that power plant, and what happens to all of that contamination and waste, because when we throw things away, there really is no away, as you and I have discussed.
Right, yeah, Barry Commoner. There is no away to throw.
There is no away to throw.
It's a simple idea, right. But it's and that's part of the title of the show, the whole ecology.
Who will be most heavily impacted by these fossil fuel infrastructure projects? Whatever happens to them, even if they're decommissioned, what happens to that waste? I know we have piles of waste. Yesterday I went for a drive in South Providence and toured that proposed site for the LNG facility, and school was just getting out, and I saw all these beautiful children in a very impoverished community.
Sure. People
of modest means, and it broke my heart. I wasn't doing the driving, I was with somebody else. I was trying to get a live feed going. Really, it didn't work that well, but it was probably good, because it gave me a chance to really pay attention to my surroundings, to mind my surroundings. Mm-hmm. And it broke my heart. The hospital is nearby, just across the water. There's East Providence, right? And there's a country club over there. So if the wind shifts, if you were to put a compass like in the center of that proposed location and see what that impact radius is, there's a lot of people that are going to be heavily impacted, even those in the wealthier communities such as East Providence.
Well, they're impacted now. I remember one of the first hearings there, the kids, these are kids 14 years old, right, talking about, I walk home from school and I get a headache every day when I get home, and then then I feel sick.
Right.
Think about that. I mean, they weren't like studying the effects of fossil fuels. They were just like, no, I walk home. Every time I walk by, there's a good chance I'm going to get a headache, depending on the way the wind's blowing.
And the kids have sleepless nights, and they go to school. They can't concentrate. They can't focus. They go to the nurse. They're sent home. Mm-hmm. So it has an effect on the education of our children as well.
Yeah. And getting back to the DAPL part with the infrastructure, Protect and Reject, that's what it was called, yeah. When they set the teepees up on the National Mall and they came riding in on their horses. That was the first time that I heard water is life.
Oh, yeah. Well, what we say in Lakota is Miniwichoni, Mini-Wachoni, we translate it water is life. That's a very loose translation. The water that we speak of in Mini-Wachoni is that the embryonic fluid in the mother's womb, that life-giving water. In Mother Earth, gives to the baby just as she gives to all of us. So yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor, and I learned that from one of my Lakota family as well.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. When I was down there was a lot of people talking about the story that's been passed down about the black snake.
We were there prayerfully opposing the Dakota Access Pipeline, and so the black snake is the pipeline, and it's also part of the Lakota prophecies that the black snake would come, and that our youth would rise up, and we believe that that time is now, and that this is a time for coming together, both allied and indigenous, and I think we're living in very exciting times. We're living in a wonderful. Just as for me, Standing Rock was a wonderful, terrifying experience. We are living in amazing times right now, where our youth are rising up. We have global attention, and yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see, and and to be a part of.
Wow. Yeah, on the panel here, I notice also Christian Hopkins, and he's a Narragansett from. It might be from Hopkinton, lives somewhere in South County.
Yeah, well, all right, so with respect to the guests, we have Hartman Dietz is coming down, and we've been on panel discussions before, Standing Rock panel discussions, and he's a wonderful Mashpee Wampanoag brother who's written a book, and I should have brought that along with me, but it has to do with food sovereignty, and I can't, if I could remember the chapter, I would quote it, but yeah, he spent some time at Standing Rock. I think he went 3 times, paid 3 visits there, and yeah, he has a lot of wonderful, valuable things to offer. And he's working now in the language department over there, I believe, for the Mashpee Wampanoags.
And I know a lot of people here.
Yeah, Christian Hopkins, he was at Standing Rock as well. I think they were there. I'm not sure how long they were there, but I think they built a wigwam and they were trying to start a Wetu. Yeah,
Wetu is there.
Yeah.
But it's a wigwam kind of a thing. And it was for a school because the intention was to have it be a permanent encampment.
Right. Right. Well, our intention was we weren't going to leave until they rolled up every square foot of that pipeline, Even as late as January 24th, that Oyate community had decided to stay, even after the executive decision by Donald Trump.
Yeah, to
allow the easement.
Yeah, and for people that don't know, the pipeline under the Missouri River was originally supposed to go through the Capitol. And
right.
They knew.
Right. It was rerouted.
It was rerouted to go through their reservation.
Yeah, it was rerouted to go through treaty land.
Treaty land, excuse me. Yeah.
So, and sacred burial grounds of the Standing Rock community, because that Lake Oahe is the only source of potable drinking water for the Standing Rock Reservation. And the source of drinking water for 11 million plus people downstream of the Missouri River as well.
Yeah, but they knew when it was going in past their drinking water that they didn't want it, but they made it like it was a controversial thing.
Minorities communities are always the communities that are most heavily impacted. Right now we're having a battle with the Invenergy's proposed fracked gas power plant for the middle of the woods over in Burrowville. Yeah. And that is a $1 billion dirty fracked gas infrastructure project. And we're gaining strides in that. great strides. People have been working hard in opposition to that power plant. It would clear cut over 200 acres, in pristine forestry, and we're gaining there.
It's almost
we're gaining. The final nail isn't in the coffin, but as Chief Attorney for Conservation Law Foundation has said, Jerry Elmer, Invenergy is essentially a zombie. You're just waiting for it to have the good grace to lay down somewhere. But it's amazing how these what we think is dead, sooner or later, once again rears its ugly head. And so what I'm saying is, so we have that going on in Burrillville, but this is Rhode Island. It's a small state. We also have this liquefaction facility in South Providence, which we need to contend with, because that is where our most vulnerable people are.
Yeah. And we, when I'm looking on here, I noticed that Lorenz Spears is going to be moderating it.
Oh yeah, she's a wonderful, wonderful woman. She's the director of the Tamaqua Museum, and she's been working hard as an educator for our indigenous communities for quite some time, and our Narragansett family.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place that has really archived some of the things of the indigenous people who lived here, and
they're expanding.
Yeah, and they're expanding it, and it's such a different history than the history we had learned. They weren't running wild. Yeah. They had aquaculture. Right. They had, they basically gave us corn, which now corn feeds 40% of all the people. Yeah. Which gets me back to your roots. Yeah,
and a great percentage of that is all GMO corn.
Yeah.
Genetically modified, so that's scary.
But you're Taino, and so talk a little bit about your indigenous history, and then if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your being adopted, your adopted name.
Okay, I am of Taino descent. On my mother's side, Puerto Rican and Cuban. My father's side, Puerto Rican and Dominican. Both my grandmothers from Puerto Rico. However, sadly, I was colonized at an early age, and never really learned to speak Spanish. The language was not passed on to me. And I'm not alone. There's a lot of historical amnesia going on around there.
Sure.
And that's why this is a time for educating, bringing back the prayer, the language, the ceremony, the song, and that's what I'm, that's what I'm helping to bring about as well. In addition to raising environmental awareness, this is about bringing back the culture.
Well, it was like we started talking about the whole ecology. That's the way they were living.
Well, it's a history of subjugation. It was kill the Indian, save the man. And, I think it's important for us to acknowledge the historical trauma. Sure. Standing Rock, I think, brought that to the forefront from a global perspective because the historical trauma is real. And I think we have to acknowledge that in a good way so that we can move forward and come together during these critical times. Because the corporations never sleep. And, we don't have time for the divisiveness. This is a time for coming together, both allied and indigenous. We are all indigenous, Robert. We are all from the womb of Mother Earth. This Uchimaka, we say Grandmother Earth. And
Uchimaka's Grandmother Earth.
Grandmother Earth, right? Some people think it's Mother Earth, but it's literally translated
I've seen it
grandmother.
Subtitled Mother Earth.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so when we go down and we see this film, we're going to watch this film, and I just wanted to get back to it for a second because Josh Fox, activist filmmaker, was the person who turned a lot of people on to the horrors of fracking with his film Gasland.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. And it was a gutsy film.
Yeah.
And he just went right in there and went to the meat of the matter, which really makes good documentary filmmaking.
Yeah.
But in this film, he did something very different. You want to talk about his segment of the film?
Awake?
Yeah, of Awake, yeah.
You know, I don't want to give away the punchline, but no, it's Awake, a Dream from Standing Rock. If you haven't, where am I? Right here. If you haven't seen it yet, you know, go out and see it. Show it in public spaces if you can, and it gives a wonderful, you know, moving experience that I think might grab you. Yeah, so yeah.
I just thought that, you know, it was very interesting that he used what was the narrator, you know, a Lakota narrator, and he was helping them. You know, he was just facilitating using filmmaking technique. I think he did a fantastic job in letting the setting and letting the people's experiences tell the stories, and letting it be from an indigenous point of view. And there aren't films out there. You know, there are no films out there that I can think of that are major, you know, films. Yeah. that work from an indigenous point of view. Yeah, I mean, it's a very different experience. And rather than be a diatribe, because you know, I'll be frank with you, some of the environmentalists that I know that were you know, against the pipelines and stuff like that, they were unhappy with the film because it didn't say the things that they thought were important to say about it.
Everybody's trying to control the narrative as to what happened at Standing Rock, and the truth is that you know, it is multidimensional, and everybody viewed Standing Rock from their vantage point, from their point of reference, and it's not a narrative that can be controlled. You know, it's a narrative that needs to be transparent for us to move forward in a good way. I've said it before, you know, before we can heal Mother Earth, we must first come to heal ourselves. And, you know, there's a lot of wounded people that need to be acknowledged in a good way. Standing Rock was a place of redemption for many people. A lot of our indigenous young people that were there at Standing Rock, they rose to the occasion during a critical time. You know, when elders, moms, dads, grandmas, and grandpas were being bombarded with tear gas, rubber bullets, tear gas canisters. We were sprayed with a water cannon in sub-freezing temperatures. Many of my friends were injured. You know, I've cried with them. I've laughed with them. I've touched their wounds. And it was an honor to share that space with them. And what I saw was miraculous. I saw the future leadership of this country and maybe the world right there at Standing Rock.
No time for sleeping.